Samuel, an 8-year-old boy, lived with his mother in a small, rundown house in the town of Greenwood. His father had passed away in a mining accident when Samuel was too young to understand loss, leaving his mother, Mary, to shoulder the burden of the family. She worked tirelessly, doing laundry for others and selling homemade pastries to support Samuel and keep their fragile home standing against the harsh winter winds. Despite their poverty, Mary always taught her son to hold on to his faith in God. She often said, "God never abandons children with pure hearts. As long as you believe and love, He will always listen." Samuel was different from other children. Born mute, he couldn't speak or sing hymns like the other kids his age. Yet, Samuel had a unique talent: painting. It was the only way he could communicate with the world. Each of his paintings told a story, an emotion, as if every stroke of his brush spoke on behalf of his heart. Every day, Samuel would sit by the roadside with his small collection of paintings. Passers-by occasionally stopped, not out of pity, but because they sensed something extraordinary in his artwork, a beauty that was simple yet profound. One cold winter evening, Samuel sat by the window, his small hands trembling from the biting wind. Beside him was a worn box of colored pencils, the only birthday gift his mother had managed to buy after much effort. Mary, weary from a long day of work, sat next to him, gently brushing the messy hair from his face and offering a tired but loving smile. "Samuel," she whispered, "do you know? Sometimes, God doesn't appear as a miracle right in front of us. He listens through the prayers in our hearts." That night, Samuel created a painting unlike anything he had ever drawn before. On the paper, he depicted God standing in a divine glow, arms wide open, embracing a small child with sorrowful eyes. The child was kneeling, as if asking him an unspoken question. At the top of the painting, Samuel carefully wrote in shaky, green pencil strokes, "Do you hear me?" When Mary saw the painting the next morning, tears welled up in her eyes. She placed her hand over the drawing, as if she could feel the very heart of her son through it. "Samuel, my dear boy, this is not just a painting. This is a prayer that the whole world needs to hear." Mary decided that the painting couldn't simply remain tucked away in a corner of their small home. Believing that it could bring something greater to the world, she encouraged Samuel to take it out. "My son, let this painting spread hope. Who knows? It might touch someone's heart, and through them, God will answer our prayers." That day, Samuel carefully placed his painting in a simple wooden frame and sat by the roadside, as he always did. A well-dressed, middle-aged man with a curious expression stopped to look. It was Robert, a renowned auctioneer from New York, passing through Greenwood on his travels. When Robert saw Samuel's painting, he paused, unable to take his eyes off the piece. "Who painted this?" he asked, his voice filled with amazement. Mary stepped forward and shared Samuel's story about the struggles he had endured, yet how he had never lost his faith in love and hope. After listening, Robert, visibly moved, said, "This painting isn't just an ordinary piece of art. It holds faith and longing within its strokes. I want to take it to an upcoming charity auction. It deserves to be seen by the world." Robert purchased the painting for far more than Mary had ever dreamed of asking. But more importantly, he promised that the painting would be displayed at a major event, where it could change not only Samuel's life, but also the lives of many other children in need. Mary held Samuel's hand tightly, tears streaming down her face as she spoke with a voice full of hope. "Do you see, my son? God always listens. He's answering us in ways we never could have imagined." Robert brought Samuel's painting to New York, carefully placing it in an exquisitely carved wooden frame, as though to honor the profound simplicity and depth of the artwork. The painting, once the humble creation of a boy on a dusty roadside, now held a place of distinction at one of the most prestigious charity auctions of the year, held in the grand ballroom of a renowned Manhattan hotel. The event was attended by an array of influential figures, famous personalities, business moguls, and top philanthropists, all gathering to support children in need. Among the evening's distinguished guests was Donald Trump, invited as the guest of honor. The ballroom itself was a masterpiece of opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from gilded ceilings, casting shimmering light over rows of meticulously displayed artwork. Each piece showcased was extraordinary, brought in from across the globe, ranging from striking oil paintings to intricate sculptures. Yet amidst the grandeur of these polished creations, Samuel's painting held a quiet presence, unassuming but captivating. It was placed in a modest corner of the gallery. Unlike the more prominent works vying for attention, this painting seemed to command the light of the room itself. The chandeliers above cast a gentle glow that illuminated the canvas, making the image of God with arms outstretched stand out even more vividly. The figure of God, painted with a childlike sincerity, held a sorrowful child close, radiating both protection and comfort. Above it all, the words Samuel had inscribed, "Do you hear me?" hung like an echo in the silence of the room, resonating with a depth that words alone could not capture. Visitors paused as they passed the painting, drawn to it without fully understanding why. It was not the most polished piece in the room, but there was something magnetic about it. It seemed to stir emotions buried deep within, as if asking each viewer the same question Samuel had asked God. Some glanced at it briefly before moving on, but others lingered, their gazes fixed, a quiet emotion flickering in their eyes. Donald Trump entered the room with his usual air of confidence, his stride purposeful and his presence commanding attention. He nodded to guests and exchanged polite greetings as he made his way through the rows of artwork. Yet, as his eyes fell on Samuel's painting, his pace slowed. There, tucked away in the corner, was something that stopped him in his tracks. Drawn by an invisible pull, Trump approached the painting, his attention captured in a way that few things ever could. Standing in front of it, he leaned slightly closer, studying every detail of the piece. The strokes were simple, almost childlike, but there was a power in their imperfection. The image of God with open arms, the sorrowful child, and those haunting words, "Do you hear me?" all seemed to speak directly to him. For a moment, it felt as though the bustling energy of the auction faded away. The world around him grew quiet. Trump found himself lost in the painting, the image stirring something deep within. It wasn't just the visual elements, it was the story behind it, the unspoken emotions woven into every brushstroke, calling out to a part of him he rarely let the world see. A server approached discreetly, ready to guide Trump to another part of the event, but he raised a hand, silently signaling for a moment longer. His gaze never left the painting. At that moment, Robert, the auctioneer, noticed Trump's lingering presence and made his way over. Sensing the significance of the moment, Trump spoke without turning, his voice steady yet carrying an undertone of curiosity. "This painting is unlike anything else here. It feels unique. Who painted it? It has a power to it, as if it's telling a story, but without needing words." Robert smiled, though he wasn't surprised by Trump's reaction. "It is unique," he said, stepping closer. "This was painted by an 8-year-old boy named Samuel. He was born mute and lives in poverty, but he has an unwavering faith in God that few of us could ever comprehend. He painted this not to sell, not to impress, but to send a prayer from his heart." As Robert shared the story of Samuel, Trump listened intently, his eyes still fixed on the painting. Robert explained how Samuel, a boy unable to speak, had used his art to communicate his deepest thoughts and emotions. He described how Samuel would sit by the roadside, quietly selling his drawings to help his mother make ends meet, and how this particular painting came to life on a cold winter night. When Robert recounted the image of Samuel, a small boy with trembling hands, creating this masterpiece as a prayer for himself and the world, Trump's expression softened. He closed his eyes briefly, as if trying to picture the scene. Then Robert mentioned the words written at the top of the painting, "Do you hear me?" The simplicity of the question, combined with the depth of Samuel's silent plea, seemed to resonate deeply with Trump. His eyes betrayed an emotion he rarely revealed: vulnerability. For a man known for his larger-than-life persona, the sight of this humble painting and the story behind it seemed to strike a chord. It wasn't just a piece of art, it was a message, a reminder of the power of faith and the quiet strength found in innocence. Trump turned to Robert, his voice quieter now but filled with conviction. "This is more than a painting. It's a voice, a child's voice, that the world needs to hear." Robert nodded. "It's remarkable how this piece has touched everyone who sees it. Samuel may not be able to speak, but through this painting, he's found a way to connect with people in a way words never could." Trump's gaze lingered on the painting once more, and for a moment, the room seemed to stand still. It was as if the painting itself had created a bridge between the boy who had painted it and the man now standing before it, connecting two lives in a way neither could have foreseen. Trump turned to Robert, his voice steady yet carrying an unmistakable sincerity. "This painting is not just a piece of art. It's the voice of a child with the purest faith. I don't just want to buy it. I want this story to become a miracle." Robert paused for a moment, surprised by the intensity in Trump's words. Though he had come to expect the unexpected from the man standing before him, Trump's expression, usually commanding and self-assured, now held something softer, something deeply personal. Robert nodded slowly, understanding that this was no ordinary transaction. Soon after, the painting was carefully carried onto the auction stage. The lights in the room dimmed slightly, drawing all attention to the modest yet powerful artwork. The host stepped forward, his voice filled with reverence as he began to tell Samuel's story. The bustling conversations that had filled the grand ballroom just moments before dissolved into a heavy silence. All eyes were now fixed on the painting. The host spoke of Samuel, a young boy who could not speak, born into poverty, yet holding an unshakable faith in God. He described how Samuel, using his small hands and his immense heart, painted this piece not to seek admiration, but to offer a prayer. As the story unfolded, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. Even the faintest sounds, the rustle of a dress, the quiet clink of a glass, felt almost intrusive in the stillness. The painting, illuminated under the spotlight, seemed to speak louder than words ever could. In the audience, some wiped away tears, while others sat frozen, their faces reflecting a mix of admiration and sorrow. It was rare for a story to touch so many people so deeply, and rarer still for it to happen in a setting as opulent as this. When the bidding began, the tension in the room was palpable. The auctioneer's voice rang out, "We will begin at $50,000." Before the number had even fully registered, Trump's paddle shot into the air. $1 million, he declared without hesitation, his voice echoing confidently across the room. The hall fell into stunned silence. A murmur rippled through the crowd, guests leaning toward one another, whispering in astonishment. Some exchanged glances, as if to confirm they had heard correctly. A few philanthropists raised their paddles tentatively, but their hesitation betrayed their lack of conviction. Trump rose from his seat, his towering presence commanding the room. His voice was firm, but filled with a passion that resonated deeply. This is not just a painting. This is a reminder that sometimes we are the hands of God. Sometimes it's up to us to answer the prayers of those who can't answer them for themselves. His words hung in the air, striking a chord in the hearts of everyone present. It wasn't just the amount he had offered, it was the gravity of what he was saying. This wasn't about the painting's value in dollars, it was about its value in faith, in hope, and in the lives it could change. No one else raised their paddle. The room remained silent, but it was the kind of silence filled with awe and respect. When the auctioneer's gavel came down, declaring the painting sold, the applause was immediate and thunderous. Yet Trump didn't return to his seat. Instead, he walked toward the stage, the painting now in his hands. Standing under the bright lights, he looked out over the room, the emotion in his expression unmistakable. "Samuel's story has inspired me," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I will cover all of his medical expenses to give him the chance to say his first words. And not only that, I will launch a campaign to build a center for children with disabilities, a place where kids like Samuel can find hope and a future." The audience erupted into applause once again, but this time, it wasn't just for Trump. It was for Samuel, for his story, and for the message of faith and compassion that had brought them all together. As the applause settled, other philanthropists began to rise, some pledging donations on the spot. Inspired by Trump's actions, they contributed generously, determined to support the vision of a center that could transform the lives of countless children. By the end of the night, the event had raised far more than anyone had anticipated. The dream of creating the Hope for Tomorrow Center was no longer just a possibility. It was a reality waiting to be built. As the evening wound down, Trump held the painting in his hands, gazing at it thoughtfully. The image of God, embracing a small, sorrowful child, seemed even more poignant now that he knew the boy behind it. He turned to an aide standing nearby and said quietly, "This boy has painted hope, and I will make sure that hope does not go to waste." The aide nodded but said nothing, sensing that this moment was not one for words. Trump looked at the painting one last time, a faint but genuine smile crossing his face. before turning to leave the room. After the auction, Samuel was taken to a renowned hospital in New York for evaluation. The doctors discovered that his vocal cords had the potential to recover with surgery and rigorous therapy. While waiting for the surgery, Samuel received dedicated care at the hospital. Every day, nurses and volunteers visited him, bringing toys and drawing books. Though unable to speak, Samuel always smiled and expressed his gratitude through his new drawings. Donald Trump did not forget about Samuel. He sent the boy a special gift, a brand new set of art supplies along with a high-quality leather notebook. Embossed in gold letters on the notebook's cover were the words, "Faith is where every miracle begins." Trump also took the time to meet with Samuel and his mother before the surgery. Standing in front of the boy, he knelt down, placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder, and said, "Samuel, you've taught me that sometimes we don't need words to make a difference. But now, it's time for you to find your voice. Be strong, okay?" The day of the life-changing surgery finally arrived. The atmosphere in the hospital seemed to pause, as if everyone was silently waiting for a miracle to unfold. Mary sat in the waiting room, clutching a small silver cross, the last gift her late husband had given her. Her lips moved in silent prayer. "Lord, I place Samuel in your hands. Please guide the doctors and grant my son a miracle. I believe you brought us here for a reason." Time felt as though it had stopped. The clock's hands moved slowly, each passing minute weighing heavily on Mary's heart. Memories of their difficult journey and her endless prayers came rushing back, tightening the ache in her chest. After hours of tense waiting, the doors to the operating room finally swung open. One of the surgeons stepped out, removed his mask, and smiled warmly at Mary. "Mrs. Mary, the surgery was a success. Samuel will need time to recover, but we are confident he will soon be able to speak." Mary burst into tears, her overwhelming joy spilling out as she ran to embrace the doctor. Over and over, she repeated, "Thank you, thank you, Lord, thank you, everyone." The doctors gently patted her shoulder, sharing her happiness. In that moment, Mary felt deep in her soul that her prayers had truly been heard. A few weeks later, after completing recovery and therapy sessions, the doctors informed Samuel that he was ready to try speaking for the first time. Sitting on the hospital bed, his eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. His mother stood beside him, gripping his hand tightly, her own anxiety hidden behind a reassuring smile. One of the doctors knelt in front of Samuel and spoke softly. "Samuel, there's no need to rush. Just take your time and feel your voice. Even the smallest sound will mean so much." Samuel looked at his mother, then back at the doctor, closing his eyes. He took a deep breath and slowly moved his small lips. At first, only a faint, hesitant sound came out, but then a single, short, deeply emotional word filled the room. "Mom." Mary froze, unable to believe her ears. A second later, she fell to her knees beside Samuel, wrapping her arms tightly around him as tears of gratitude and joy streamed down her face. She sobbed silently, overcome with emotion. The room erupted into applause. Doctors and nurses who had gathered to witness the moment clapped, many wiping away their own tears. One doctor leaned over to his colleague and whispered, "I've seen countless medical miracles in my career, but this moment still brings me to tears." Mary looked into Samuel's eyes, her voice trembling as she whispered through her sobs, "You did it, Samuel. God heard your prayers." Samuel, though he had only said one word, beamed with a radiant smile. He reached for a pen and a piece of paper nearby, and carefully wrote a simple yet powerful message. "We did it." From that day on, Samuel worked tirelessly to improve his speech. Every word he uttered carried immense joy and hope, not just for himself, but for everyone who had walked alongside him on his journey. The moment Samuel said, "Mom," was more than just a milestone in his life. It was proof that with unwavering faith and boundless love, miracles truly can happen. Months had passed since Samuel's life-changing surgery and the moment he spoke his first words. In that time, a vision born of faith, generosity, and love had become a reality, the Hope for Tomorrow Center. It was a place unlike any other, a sanctuary where children with disabilities could not only receive medical care but also find a nurturing environment to learn, play, and dream of brighter futures. This remarkable achievement was made possible through the collective efforts of hundreds of donors and the unwavering support of Donald Trump. On the day of the grand opening, the center stood proudly, its exterior adorned with vibrant ribbons that swayed gently in the breeze. The event had drawn a crowd of hundreds, celebrities, business leaders, philanthropists, and families from all walks of life filled the courtyard, their faces alight with anticipation. The air buzzed with excitement, but the heart of the ceremony belonged to one boy and one painting, Samuel and his extraordinary work of art. As the program commenced, guests mingled, marveling at the beauty of the center. Its design reflected not just function, but also the spirit of hope it promised to foster. Walls were lined with vibrant artwork created by children, and in the main hall, Samuel's story was highlighted in an exhibit that included his original sketches, photographs of his journey, and, of course, the painting that had inspired it all. When it was time for the main event, the crowd gathered near a stage set against the backdrop of the center's entrance. A spotlight shone on Donald Trump as he stepped onto the stage, holding Samuel's painting in his hands. Dressed in his signature suit and tie, he looked out over the audience, his expression a blend of pride and solemnity. He raised the painting for all to see, and the murmurs in the crowd fell silent. Trump began to speak, his voice steady and warm, resonating through the outdoor space. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we stand here because of one boy and one question. A question painted not with words, but with faith. Samuel's story is a reminder that sometimes God doesn't appear in the ways we expect. Instead, He shows up through the actions we take for one another. This center is not just a building. It is a place where miracles are made every day." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, and then continued. "When I first saw this painting at the auction, I didn't just see an image. I saw a prayer, a plea for hope, and a call to action. Samuel's journey, from painting this masterpiece on a cold winter night to standing here today, is proof that faith and love can change lives." Trump recounted the story of how he first encountered the painting and how it moved him to act, sharing details that brought tears to the eyes of many in the audience. He spoke of the boy who had inspired a movement, who had taught everyone in that room that miracles are often the result of courage, determination, and the kindness of others. As Trump concluded his speech, He turned to the front row, where Samuel sat beside his mother. The boy's eyes sparkled as Trump extended a hand, inviting him to the stage. The crowd watched in hushed anticipation as Samuel, though small in stature, walked with steady determination toward the podium. The sunlight caught his face, illuminating the quiet strength and resolve within him. When he reached the stage, an event staff member handed him a microphone. Samuel took it with trembling hands. For a moment, he glanced at the crowd, his gaze scanning the faces of hundreds of people. Then he looked at his mother, who smiled at him with all the reassurance in the world. Gathering his courage, Samuel turned back to the audience. His voice was soft but clear, carrying a depth of emotion far beyond his years. "Thank you, Mr. Trump. Thank you, God. Thank you, everyone. Every miracle begins with love." The words hung in the air, echoing in the silence that followed. For a brief moment, the crowd seemed frozen, overwhelmed by the simplicity and power of Samuel's message. Then, as if on cue, the audience erupted into applause. It began as a ripple and quickly grew into a standing ovation. Thunderous and unrelenting, people clapped, cheered, and some even wiped away tears as they celebrated this extraordinary boy and the journey that had brought him here. After the applause finally began to subside, Trump knelt down and wrapped Samuel in a heartfelt embrace. "Samuel," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've done something incredible today. You haven't just changed your own life. You've given hope to thousands of other children who will walk through these doors." As the ceremony concluded, Samuel's painting was carried to its permanent home at the center's entrance. There, it was placed in the most prominent spot, framed with care and pride. Beneath it, a plaque bore words Trump had written for the occasion. "Listen to the prayers of small hearts and become the miracle they need." Guests lingered around the painting, gazing at it with reverence. It was no longer just an artwork. It was a symbol, a reminder of how one boy's quiet faith and the compassion of others had created something extraordinary. As the guests began to leave and the evening drew near, Samuel remained at the center, now surrounded by children who would benefit from the programs it offered. He no longer painted to sell his work on dusty streets. Instead, his creations were filled with vibrant colors and messages of hope, designed to inspire others like him. His paintings were displayed throughout the center, becoming a source of encouragement for every child who walked through its doors. Samuel's story spread far beyond the walls of the center. It became a testament to the idea that even the smallest act of faith, when met with kindness and action, can lead to miracles. Samuel's story is not simply the tale of a single miracle. It is a beacon of hope, a flame that has the power to ignite faith in hearts across the world. What began with the humble strokes of a poor boy painting by the roadside has grown into something far greater than himself. From the day Samuel picked up a pencil to share his prayer with the world to the unforgettable moment he spoke his first words, his journey reminds us all that miracles don't always come wrapped in the supernatural. Sometimes, miracles are found in the quiet acts of kindness shared between strangers. They are born from the generosity of one heart reaching out to another, or the courage it takes to believe in something bigger than yourself. Samuel's life is proof of this truth. Even when faced with silence, he spoke through his art. Even in the midst of despair, he clung to hope. And even in his darkest moments, His faith turned a tiny spark of light into a guiding flame that touched countless lives. His painting is more than a piece of art. It is a prayer immortalized in color and form, a question that echoes in the hearts of all who see it. Do you hear me? Those words, so simple yet profound, remind us that God always listens. He doesn't always appear in the ways we expect. He doesn't always come with fanfare or miraculous signs. Instead, He works quietly, through the outstretched hands of those willing to help, through the loving hearts of those who act, and through the lives changed by compassion. When Samuel's painting was hung at the entrance of the Hope for Tomorrow Center, it became more than just an image. It became a symbol of everything the center stands for: faith, love, and the belief that no child's voice, no matter how small, should go unheard. Beneath the painting, the plaque bearing Donald Trump's words, "Listen to the prayers of small hearts and become the miracle they need," served as a constant reminder to everyone who walked through those doors. Samuel's story delivers a message that resonates deeply. Each of us, no matter who we are or where we come from, has the ability to be someone else's miracle. It doesn't require wealth or fame. It requires a willingness to listen, to open your heart, and to take action when it's needed most. As the story of Samuel's journey spread, it inspired people far beyond the walls of the center. Parents spoke of the lessons they learned from his faith. Children saw in him the courage to dream big, no matter their circumstances. And those who had doubted their ability to make a difference found themselves moved to act, realizing that even the smallest gesture could change a life. In Samuel's painting and his story, there is a reminder for all of us. Faith and love are not passive forces. They are actions. They are decisions we make every day to help, to hope, to believe. Samuel's life, his art, and his words have shown us that no matter how small we feel, our actions can ripple outward, creating waves of change in the world around us.